McGovern is here. He is a former senator from South Dakota. He's also a longtime activist for eradicating world hunger. McGovern has written a new book. It is called What It Means to Be a Democrat. I'm pleased to have him back at this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. It's a pleasure to be on your program.
We have known each other for a long, long time.
We have indeed.
What's your life like today?
It's wonderful. Retirement for me, Charlie, means going from about 14 hours a day down to 12. Yes. I still work every day. I still write. I still make speeches. Yeah. I don't know whether anybody's listening, but I know that I continue to speak. And I'm writing. I'm working on my memoir. Yeah. I did this little book, What It Means to Be a Democrat. The reason I wrote this book is that I'm so tired of the negativism in American politics today. I've never seen our politics more confused than it is today. So I decided to write a book on what I'm for.
Yes.
What it means to be a Democrat.
So what does it mean? What does it mean to be a Democrat, and what are you for?
It means this. I'll tell you what I'm not for. I don't agree with those who criticize the federal government as our enemy. I think it's the best government in the world. And look at all the things it has done. So I cringe when I hear some of my Republican friends talking about the terrible federal government. I don't think it's terrible. Look at all the wonders we have from that government. Just to mention two, the interstate highway system, the rural electrification program that's brought light in the homes of all the farms of America. Those are things the federal government did, and I wanted to relate those.
Putting a man on the moon?
Yeah, putting a man on the moon, providing the GI Bill of Rights. After World War II, I was a bomber pilot in that war. When I came home, the government had this GI Bill, this awful federal government. It enabled me to go all the way through to a PhD in history at Northwestern University at government expense.
It's an interesting aspect of your life that in 1972, you let yourself be perceived, or you didn't fight it hard enough, and they defined you as soft on crime and soft on defense. Neither were true.
Well, it's ridiculous. I mean, what American? I'm an American patriot. I fought for this country and risked my life in World War II. I'd do it again if the circumstances were the same. But I don't know how the Republicans get on this kick that Democrats are soft on crime and soft on defense. I've always been for a strong defense, but I don't believe in wasting money on defense. Right now, we have a $700 billion military bill, and nobody's threatening us. Can you think of a country that wants to go to war with the United States? I can't.
Leon Panetta, a good Democrat, says that if, and now Secretary of Defense says that if, in fact, the sequestration takes place, the word that they use coming out of the Super Committee, that it will affect the security of the country. That severe a defense cut.
Well, those defense secretaries always have to play scared and talk about fear and talk about danger. I know Leon. He's a brilliant man. He knows better than that.
You don't agree with him?
No, I don't. I don't know of any country that's threatening us today. Now, they certainly were in World War II, which was the war that I volunteered for, and I'm glad that I did, because then we had Hitler, we had Tojo, we had Mussolini. They were all out to get us.
What size military budget would you think appropriate?
Well, I think we could begin working it down. Now, you can't do this overnight, but I would think that within 5 years, we could cut it in half. We'd still be far and away the most powerful country in the world.
Would we have a presence in South Korea? Would we have a presence in Europe? Where would you make the cuts? Weapons programs?
We'd have some presence in Europe, but I think the Europeans are capable of defending themselves. I don't know of anybody that's threatening Europe. Who's going to invade Germany or France or Britain? So we kind of scare ourselves into these enormous military budgets. I don't think they make us any safer. I think they make us less safe because we waste money on things that we don't need for our defense, and that deprives us of funds we need for the schools, for the hospitals, for our environment, for putting people back to work in public works.
Is there a Democratic consensus on this, though? A Democratic consensus?
Well, if there's a Democratic consensus on it, they're sure being quiet about it. I think that if the Democrats would remind the country in the year 2012 that the Republicans are against Social Security and they're against Medicare, they wouldn't have to go very far to win that election, because everybody knows the Democrats were the authors of Social Security. We don't want to cut it. We don't want to cut Medicare. I would like to extend Medicare to all Americans, but at least if we just start...
But do you believe President Obama was prepared to, in a grand bargain, cut entitlements?
I wish he'd be a little bolder than he has been.
What's bold mean for you?
Well, bold means that you jump right down the throat of the opposition when they attack Social Security and Medicare and say, look, we're not going to cut it. We're not going to talk to you about compromise on programs
you wouldn't
that are
allow
working.
the fact that perhaps Medicare could be reformed and perhaps Medicare
if it can,
could be more efficient. Perhaps Medicare needs a hard look in order to make it better.
Well, let's do that if we can make it better. But let's not talk about cutting it back. Let's not talk about abolishing it, because our population is growing. People are living longer. There's never been a time that we needed Social Security and Medicare more than we need right today.
Who are your political heroes?
Well, Abraham Lincoln, number one. Franklin Roosevelt, number two. Thomas Jefferson.
Of the Founding Fathers, Thomas Jefferson.
Of the Founding Fathers, Jefferson would be my first choice, and then Ben Franklin. You know, Ben Franklin didn't run for office. He's still my hero. I think he was one of the most remarkable Americans. I think Franklin Roosevelt did more to have an impact on America today than any president in the 20th century. Nobody else in the 20th century could touch him, in my opinion. He gave us rural electrification. He gave us minimum wages. He gave us aid to education. He started health care. So many things. And furthermore, he was very successful on the international front. Roosevelt had an enormously successful record internationally, not only in winning World War II, but in putting us out in front on foreign assistance and all these other things that have...
Is the most important political act of your life the opposition to the Vietnam War?
Yes, that was the most striking, because for 10 years in the United States Senate, I blasted that war with everything I had. And then when I found out I couldn't end it as a senator, I became a candidate for president. The main purpose of that was to end that war in Vietnam. And even though I lost that election, I think we forced an end to it by having a major party, the Democratic Party, and a candidate for president who dedicated his campaign to ending that war. As you know, Congress ended it right after the 72 presidential race.
But for the ideas you believe in terms of domestic issues, Lyndon Johnson was as good a president as it gets.
Lyndon Johnson, as you say, on the domestic side, forget about Vietnam, on the domestic side was the most productive president of the 20th century, with the exception of Franklin Roosevelt. But he was a great president. He got enacted into law the two major civil rights pieces of legislation that transformed the racial situation.
Civil rights and voting rights.
The Voting Rights Act and the public utilities, the public acceptance at restaurants and bars and so on. I think he was a great president.
Did he listen to you on Vietnam?
No.
Wouldn't listen to you?
No, he wouldn't.
So what do you think about the Afghanistan war?
Well, we never should have gone into Afghanistan, going back to 2,000 years. People have been puttering around with Afghanistan. The British tried it for a while. The Mongolians before them. The French.
So even after 9/11, you'd think we should not have attacked Afghanistan?
No, no, we should not have.
But what would you have done to go after Osama bin Laden, who ordered those attacks on America?
I would have had a small group of people combing the woods trying to get to him, but I would not have put the American army into Afghanistan.
So what does it mean to be a Democrat today? What ought to be the rallying cry for Democrats in the 2012 election?
We should say we Democrats believe in the federal government. We don't think it's our enemy, and we'd like to make it an instrument of the public good. We'd like to see that health care is extended to all Americans. We'd like to see that our schools are strengthened, that our environment is strengthened. We'd like to continue to push for peace in the world. These are the things we believe in, and this is why the Democratic Party is our chosen vessel.
As you know, people will come along at the same time and say, Senator McGovern, we'd like to do all of that. We'd wish we had an unlimited amount of money to do all of those kinds of programs, but we don't. We have a huge deficit that's been built up because of the wars we fought, but also other reasons, and we need to deal to that deficit or our economy will never get back in order so that we have a kind of economic machine that can benefit everybody.
There was no big bulge in the deficit, the federal deficit, until the Reagan administration. And the reason it went up $4 trillion there, and that was the biggest jump we'd had up until that time under any administration, was because he kept increasing military spending and then giving tax cuts.
Right.
You can't cut your revenues and increase spending without. So that was the first big.
You never bought supply-side economics.
That's correct. I never bought supply-side economics. And the second big bulge came under Bush Jr. Another $4 trillion.
Bush
Why?
43.
Because he cut the taxes to the wealthy and got us into 2 wars.
Yeah.
And so there's $8 trillion of the $15 billion, over half of it on those 2 wars. We've got to quit getting involved in these wars that contribute
As
nothing
a
to our
short-term
security.
measure, would you like to see the Bush tax cuts eliminated, and would you like to see a larger share of taxes paid by the wealthy, and would you like to see, the tax reform that would produce more tax revenue for the country?
Well, all of those things. I believe in the graduated income tax that we got under Woodrow Wilson many years ago. I think it's the foundation stone of all these programs to strengthen the United States. It means that the more you make, the higher your tax rate goes. And that's the only fair way to do it.
The book is called What It Means to Be a Democrat by George McGovern, looking good here at the table. It's so great to see you, and I thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure to be with you.